The policy costing tutorial of the Westminster Foundation for Democracy is brought by myself, Vasko Karankelevski, K-Group Consulting. The goal of this tutorial is to gain understanding on policy costing and use of cost estimations, especially in parliamentary context. The focus of this tutorial is on how to compile cost estimates as well as effectively scrutinize estimations. When we start creation of policy, we usually look for creating impact for better living conditions or resolving challenges of citizens, or providing results as improvements in the lives in terms of social, health, economic and other areas of living. Or to be more concrete, in more concrete features, what is the policy about, the number of affected citizens and planned timing of introduction of policy. Is the policy part of an existing scheme or it's replacing another activity which is already present? So that costs are additional or total, net or gross. In general, we need cost estimations to evaluate and compare alternative paths and policies that could lead to similar results. We also need them to define the scope and size of policy interventions to reach a certain goal. We use them to examine and scrutinize existing policies, legislations, or infrastructure investment. Policy cost estimations are mainly used in preparing and examining legislation, such as budgetary implications for new public institutions, or budgetary implications of new laws or change of existing laws. We use them for developing and examining policy, such as increase of pensions or free childcare. But we also use them for planning and scrutinizing infrastructure investment as water and sanitation replacement or road infrastructure. When it comes to policy costing, we need to know the final number, and it's great to know that it is accurate. But we also need to know how our politicians arrived at that number. So cost estimations serve the purpose to understand intervention logic and arguments for introduction of specific policies. But who might prepare cost estimates? It's usually executive bodies, government, parliamentary staff, political parties, academia, or independent and private organizations. These organizations are the ones that could also be involved in reviewing and scrutinizing of cost estimates. There is a difference in preparation or scrutinizing cost estimates. Preparing cost estimates is harder than to scrutinize the cost estimates because, on one hand, there are guides that are available for cost estimations, but there are not really many formal guides for scrutinizing cost estimations. We shortly elaborate in this tutorial both preparing and scrutinizing of costs, since the goal for scrutinizing cost estimates does improvements in the costing process on continuous basis. So when do we prepare cost estimates? Before starting a project or introduction of new legislation and policy? Usually after project completion or after introduction of policy, when there is policy changes which are proposed or ongoing, and cost estimations are used on a regular basis for monitoring and evaluation of policies, legislation and projects. In preparation of cost estimations, assumptions are key. The questions we need to consider are: did we take all the relevant factors into consideration? Is there a connection to other policies that are already in place? Are these all the factors that need to be considered, or we lack some important factors to consider? Is the data we use for estimations obtainable? Is it up to date? Is it relevant? Are the duration and resources for implementation defined and quantified? Key assumptions are key factors to take into consideration because they influence cost of policy, and they are representing the key drivers of policy. The basis and source of assumptions should be elaborated always. Are they from official statistics, survey results, research reports, or somewhere else? It's always good to list the limitations and uncertainties we have been faced with in preparation of cost estimations. There are certain concerns in estimating costs which require answers. Is the methodology clearly set out? Is it elaborated, acceptable, and is it following certain rules or standards? What assumptions have been made, on which ground? Are those realistic, evidence-based, or just anecdotal? What is the level of detail in estimations? What data has been used? Which sources? What is their reliability, relevance? Are they up to date? Have we used timescales? And what is the period of timescales and trends we have been using? What results do alternative approaches produce? And are those similar to the intended policy? And are these alternatives analyzed? Sensitivity analysis also should be available and prepared, at least to identify the factors that could significantly alter the results or alter the demand or any of the assumptions we have taken into consideration. We should possibly measure the impact of these factors in the sensitivity analysis and possibly present different scenarios if available. To summarize, when preparing cost estimates, we need to identify the areas of affected spending, identify the cost drivers, explain and outline assumptions and limitations. We also need to calculate the baseline costs with up-to-date data. We need to prepare a sensitivity analysis to see the effectiveness of policy in achieving a specific goal for which it is intended to, and at the end, present the costing and available scenarios. A regular question is, what if we get the estimates wrong? Well, often costs end up to be wrong, since those are based on assumptions and estimations, but we still need to make them. Policies and legislation do change, thus causing change in key assumptions. In addition, circumstances that could influence costs are not always foreseeable, and those can change as well. Then why do we need to estimate if costs are wrong? We need them for scrutinizing cost estimations. And scrutinizing enables us to make improvements in costing next time. They enable us to change policy. They enable us to get better informed and have a more transparent policy, maybe even abandon a policy. Scrutinizing of cost estimations is required to be done as much and as often as possible in order to continuously improve the cost estimations process. In conclusion, cost estimations vary significantly depending from the factors we take into account. Estimations vary from the data we choose to use, like current trends, averages, or forecasts. It is important to get to any cost estimation in order to further monitor it and potentially revise policies. Have in mind that the process of cost estimations is requiring continuous improvement and scrutinizing exercises over and over again. Thank you for your attention, and please check out our exercise videos.